Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. The Greenhouse is billed as the UK's first zero-waste performance space, holding up to 50 audience members in its in-the-round standalone venue made from found and recycled materials, which even has its own bar. The theatre had its first outing in Edinburgh in partnership with Dynamic Earth as part of the 2019 Festival Fringe, and this summer will tour 3 spaces in London from May to September 2023, with a varied programme of events, beginning at Royal Docks, moving to Canary Wharf and finishing at Battersea Power Station. I spoke to Oli Savage, artistic director of the Greenhouse, just before the London opening, and I asked him to explain how the idea for the venue originally came about.
Back in 2016, a friend and collaborator of mine, Henry Roberts, was working on a script about kind of violence towards the planet and violence towards each other and how we view like that kind of thing, and the damage that we kind of do to the planet. And he asked me to read it very kindly, and it was a really, really exciting, really interesting script. I think he's a really, really brilliant writer. And so that's kind of, before that, I wasn't really doing much environmental work. And that kind of was the first thing that kind of started pushing me in that direction. And it was a script that I was really excited about and a show that I really wanted to put on. Jump forward to the following summer of 2018, it would be actually. And I was working on a tour kind of completely differently, working on a tour that culminated at the Edinburgh Fringe. And we'd sold about 90% of our tickets before we got there. Not because we were necessarily particularly, well known, but we were doing a Midsummer Night's Dream and, Shakespeare sells. And it was also a lot of fun. And so we were on the Royal Mile handing out flyers in the pouring rain. And I turned to our marketing manager and I was like, why are we doing this? Surely this can't be that effective. And she was like, yeah, and it's also obviously really bad for the environment as well. And kind of, we started chatting about all the flyers that are produced and the paper waste and all that kind of stuff. And that really got me thinking, okay, so I've got this really exciting environmental show on my desk, and I'm aware that kind of theatre practice and a lot of the work we do in the industry can be quite damaging to the environment. And surely there's something there. Yeah, exactly. I met with another collaborator of mine a few days later, and we just kind of started talking. And the jumping off point was this script, and it was kind of, okay, so if we want to do this script, how do we make sure that we're delivering the practice of our work in the same way as the theory and the idea of what's behind it? How do we make sure that it all kind of matches up? And basically it all just spiraled from there. And we ended up with, okay, so we're going to have to build our own venue and, et cetera, because, we had to just kind of do it in our own way. And so, and then the Greenhouse was born, and that was 2019. And now we're a couple of years later, and it's all very exciting.
Okay, so you decided to build your own theatre. So what's it actually made from? How did you build it?
Yeah, great question. So the Greenhouse is the UK's first zero-waste theatre. And what that means is that everything we do doesn't generate any waste, and includes our building. So our building, and I'll talk a bit about what that means to us as well, but our building is built basically completely out of found and recycled materials. So when we say kind of generating no waste, one of the big things for us is it's important that everything we use had some sort of life before us. So everything is secondhand or surplus, used, that kind of thing. And so the venue that we've got up now, for example, you're talking a load of timber that was from across the country. There are these amazing wood recycling centres that basically take wood from build sites or from old sets and that kind of thing. And they basically reclaim that wood. Often they're working with kind of at-risk teenagers to give them carpentry skills and that kind of thing, which is obviously really awesome. So great organizations to support. And I would say, even if you're doing a project in your back garden, have a look, because they're really awesome. And so that's the timber. And then the framing is pallets, reclaimed pallet board. And then it's kind of all on this skeleton made of metal lighting truss. And then various sheds and other pieces of reclaimed timber make up our bar and our box office and all that kind of thing. And I think it's important because, from the very fabric of our building, everything that we do is dedicated to this kind of, environmentally friendly, sustainable, zero waste approach.
Yeah. I suppose that the technology has come on so much in the last few years that the power side of it is a lot easier than it used to be. With LED lights, there are a lot less power hungry than old-fashioned lights. So I suppose you've got a bit of a start with that, haven't you?
That's very true, but we actually are mostly energy free. Now we're starting a bar, we're starting to get into energy, but the roof is actually made out of surplus corrugated PVC. So the whole venue is naturally lit. Usually we're open mostly during the summer. And once the sun goes down, we do have some like fairy lights that just kind of provide a bit of ambient lighting. But it's all about being in this kind of shared space. And I think, to be honest with you, that leads to, watching a show in the greenhouse, I think, feels different to watching a show anywhere else, literally anywhere else, except for maybe outdoors, in that it's really a shared experience. There isn't really anything that delineates the audience from the performers, and not in an intimidating way, but just in a way that, for me, theatre is really about a shared experience and about people kind of, celebrating a moment together. It's that kind of real holiness that comes from when you have a load of people in a room trying to kind of tell a story and engage and share a moment. And I think the greenhouse celebrates that. And part of that is the lack of lighting, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And it started out actually as a problem, because the first time we ever built the venue, we didn't have access to any electricity because we were just on this patch of grass. And so we were like, how are we going to do that? Well, I guess but now it's actually become a really important feature of the way the venue works. And I think that is a good way to think about a lot of this kind of sustainability work. Is it seems like a challenge to begin with, but once you get into it, it actually becomes a real exciting feature, I think.
Yeah. I suppose it's natural to come to that situation and say, well, we can't do theatre without electricity, but maybe think of it a different way around, and you can, can't you? It doesn't need it.
And it's funny when we're working with incoming shows, because a lot of the time we're like, we do now offer some electricity, but we're always like, if you're using electricity, have a real think about if you could not. And, we often get people being like, oh yeah, but we just want to do a little bit of projection. Or, oh yeah, we just want to do a little bit of sound. And it's funny how when you're like, but what if you didn't? Those people are like, wow, I never even thought about that, Yeah. And not in a critical way, but it's so integral to the way that we make theatre at the moment. And decoupling that, removing all those kind of trappings and getting down to the core of what it is to sit in a room and tell a story with and for people, I think it's exciting. Yeah.
And the idea of theatre in an afternoon in the same light as the people on stage, I mean, it's like Shakespeare's Globe, really, isn't it? Exactly.
Well, this is the thing, is it's nothing innovative. We've been, since people have been telling stories to other people, that's how it's worked. We're just kind of trying to do something a bit simpler.
Yeah. It's a theatre in the round as well. So
yes.
How does that affect the type of shows that you put on there?
Yeah, I mean, same point as all this stuff with the electricity. I think we are excited to work with lots of different artists, and a lot of those artists don't necessarily work in the round very often. And an exciting part of it is like how they adapt and adjust to kind of fit into the venue. Again, in the round. So I've only directed a handful of shows that have been in like a traditional kind of end on actual theatre. My background is a lot of like site specific, immersive, and then working in unusual layouts, mostly in the round and traverse. And so for me, it's exciting. And to be really frank, when we designed the building, I got to be a key part of designing the building. And so I kind of really got to have my input. I got to have the stage that I wanted to have, and not everyone has that luxury. But yeah, no, I think that kind of adds to this sense of shared space and togetherness that the lighting and kind of all these other elements, help to create. And I really love it. I think it adds that sense of like community and communion to the space. Yeah.
Yeah, it does mean thinking in a slightly different way, though, because one of the theatres I go to regularly is the Royal Exchange in Manchester, and they've been doing it since the 1970s. But even so, occasionally you go there and you get stuck behind a piece of scenery for a small part of it. So you really need to think it through, don't you?
Well, to a degree, yeah. But I think, again, sorry to keep harping on about it, but at the greenhouse, a big part of zero waste is reducing consumption. And it's like, because how can we use less? Yeah. And so if we have set, it's very minimal, because the show is much more about people in the space. And so that kind of problem doesn't come up as much. Now, my brain, in terms of my directorial process, my brain is specifically wired, because I've been doing it for pretty much my whole career, to think about like, how do people appear in a circuit, in the round space? How do all those sightlines work? And so I'm, to be frank, probably shouldn't say this, in public, but I'm not so good at thinking about composition. I'm not so good at thinking about composition in a two-dimensional space. I'm much better at thinking about it in a three-dimensional space. And yeah, it is challenging, and it is a question mark. But I also think, especially when you're low on set, like, now what you've really got is just 50 flies on the wall in terms of the audience, right? 50 flies on the wall, and then you're just making something happen in the space, and they're kind of spectating that and hopefully being a part of it as well. But yeah, it definitely is a different style. I'm sorry if I'm answering the question badly, because I guess I'm just saying it's a style that I like. So, yeah.
No, that's fine. The other thing you have to contend with something that's even semi-outdoor is, all right, you're doing it in summer, but the weather's not always kind to you. And if you've got a roof like the one I've seen in the photos, the rain can be quite noisy, I would imagine.
It can. I think I'm really enjoying this discussion. This is a really interesting discussion, because it feels like you're pitching problems and I'm pitching our solutions.
Yes.
Not problems, but like, why we think it's exciting. But yeah, to me, that's again, like a huge positive, right? Like something that I don't like about working in a lot of traditional theatre spaces is they can, in working to make them a canvas, in terms of just like a black box where you can do whatever. What I think that does sometimes lead to is them being sterile. They're just a space with nothing. And then you make something in them, and that's exciting. Yeah. But the space itself isn't anything. And especially when we're working as a company that's trying really hard to connect people with the natural world and the world around them, the weather is like such a huge asset to that. And it means that, you take Mike Alfred's and Different Every Night to a whole nother level, because now it's not just like how are the actors responding and how are they present, but how does the entire show respond to what everything around you is doing? And that means hecklers. For anyone who's worked in outdoor work, hecklers are they're a classic. It means the weather. It means like animals. It means what's the grass doing? And ultimately, rather than being a distraction, I think that actually makes it a much richer experience. All of this stuff it seems like there's so much going on and it's all distracting, but actually what I think it does is it brings the whole thing together in this almost like mindful experience of like, I'm being present with these people, hearing this story and engaging with everything around me while that story is being told. And so when it rains, you wouldn't believe me until you come and experience it. But when it rains, it's really nice, because you kind of have that soft patter or loud pattering of the rain on the rooftop, but inside it's kind of warm and you're dry, and it just has that feeling of a cup of hot tea in a thunderstorm. It feels isolated and in a really beautiful way. And so yeah, I think the weather is an asset. To be very honest, the worst weather is when it's hot. Yeah. Because then it kind of can amplify, but we've designed it so it's kind of a wind tunnel, so it does keep cool. But yeah, so no, I think the weather is actually a really fun part of it.
Well, you also need, it's fine for you to be responding to that, but you also need actors who can respond in the moment to that sort of thing as well, don't you?
Really true. Yeah. Well, I think for me, a big part of my process is like a week, maybe a little bit more of like workshop in terms of like helping the performers adjust to the style that's required of the greenhouse. And that's essential. You can't work, because actors are truly versatile, brilliant people. And a lot of them have worked outside. And it's really important that you're not just chucking them in blind, but you're like, just so you understand, this is what this space is like, and this is how you need to work effectively in this space. And I guess maybe I will at some point, but I'm yet to run across that as a problem. I think a lot of actors really relish the opportunity to do something that's a little bit different, and a slightly different approach to maybe what they're used to.
Yeah. The first time you did this it seems very appropriate. You were at Dynamic Earth in Edinburgh, weren't you?
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, they were really, really awesome partners. Just a really great organization to work with on that. So, yeah, I mean, I mentioned my background in kind of outdoor work. I do have a bit of a history of kind of basically spending about a week on Google Maps, trying to spot loads of different locations and then make phone calls. And I was kind of doing that in Edinburgh, and I actually didn't know about Dynamic Earth. I went to university in Scotland, and I know Edinburgh quite well, but I hadn't come across Dynamic Earth, weirdly. And yeah, we came across them, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And this is kind of one of the rare occasions where I didn't have to go through a whole backup list. Like, they were very much our first choice, and I called them, and our contacts there were really excited about it, thought it was a really exciting project. And frankly, I guess I don't want to speak for them, but I hope that it was quite an easy project for them. Like, I hope that it wasn't too complicated for them to engage with. And yeah, and so, they were basically just really nice and really helpful. And I guess off the back of that, my number one approach to this project and all projects is kind of always, make the phone call. Just make the phone call and see, what's the worst that can happen.
Yeah. And then a couple of years after that, you were commissioned by the Design Museum in London, which is a very different concept.
Yeah, so that wasn't for the venue. That was for a kind of storytelling exhibition that we were working on with them. Really, really a lot of fun. So they were working on an exhibition called Wastage, which was really interesting. It was all about how the design process can like help to eliminate waste from everyday life. And they reached out to us asking if we were interested in the commission, and we were like, yeah, it sounds really, really exciting. And we developed with kind of some of our community groups and engaging with our community this like storytelling storytelling performance that took place in their foyer, I think like 4 times a day for a few days, maybe more than 4. And it was really simple. We had 3 stories, and the stories were fairy tales, and they were all kind of about waste and how we interact with waste. And because obviously, like for me, some people walk past a skip and they're like gross, whereas I walk past a skip and I see work. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, great, let's see what's in there, right? And that's my whole perspective on waste at the moment. It's turning me into a bit of a gremlin, really. Yeah. But yeah, and that was a really, really exciting project, and they were an awesome team to work with. And that was our first kind of major commission outside of doing the actual venue and exploring how we can make sure that we're telling the stories we want to tell in alternative spaces and with other people's spaces. It's interesting because since then, we don't actually, I suppose this is a really good example of Design Museum. We don't really like to tell stories that are explicitly about climate or about the environment. What we much rather do is tell softer stories that are about kind of our relationship with nature, if at all, or our relationship with other people. And I think the Design Museum is a great example of that because, for example, one of the stories we had was called The Tin Can Man. And it was about this kid who had a tin can that he loved it. He just loved this old tin can and he used it for loads of things. And then one day some bullies stole it from him and he was very sad about it. And then a couple of days later, this man comes into town and he's riding this horse-drawn wagon, and it's got in this wagon, it's this like magical shop. And it's got all these different inventions that are made out of tin cans, like a little train and like a coffee pot and like a bird feeder and loads of different things. And so that I think is a good example of, it's not us being like, you should be more sustainable, but it's us being like, consider the joy and wonder when you reorientate your perspective for what waste is and how you can kind of find magic and connection and beauty in anything.
Yeah. So a theatre like this that's built with bits and pieces that you've got from various places, it's fine to build it in one place, but how do you transport that around? Is it easy to rebuild in each location?
Well, we'll find out is the answer. So this is a really exciting experiment for us because we are going to be in 3 different locations. We're going to be in the Royal Docks, where we're opening on Thursday, the 11th of May, and then we're over to Canary Wharf, and then over to Battersea. And really, really exciting to be doing multiple locations. This is our first time where we're doing multiple locations in a short run. And so we've just had about 2.5 weeks of build where we've been like putting the venue up and making adjustments and stuff. In theory, very much in theory, we'll see, it should now be pretty easy to take down and put back up again. Like the way we've kind of made the adjustments and put it together should make it quite easy to do. We'll see what happens, but that's the idea, at least. That's the answer. Really, like it should be able to come down in a week and go up in a week by when we're moving to Canary Wharf. And I'm pretty confident that it will be able to, but again, it's all a fun experiment. We'll see what happens.
But you've been rehearsing, taking it apart and putting it back together, have you?
Well, no, but we probably should.
The shows that you do, they're zero waste, but you mentioned about the bar before. So how do you make the bar zero waste? I would imagine that's a bit of a challenge.
It is. It kind of is and it isn't. Beer and cider, easy as you like. So easy. It's kegs. It's pretty standard stuff. Unfortunately, there is a tiny, tiny bit of waste there where most kegs come with like a little plastic top. And so unfortunately, that's the only way we can really do that. So we're obviously going to be keeping those and recording that. But the bigger challenge has basically been everything else. And we're getting to the bottom of it. There are a few really exciting companies that make cocktails and spirits in a zero waste way. And so, all of that is exciting. But it's not as hard as you'd think it is. Like, we're using reusable plastic cups. We've got our kegs for our beers and ciders. Hopefully we're going to have a partner for juice, but I think they might be pulling out, which means we're going to have to look at a slightly different way of delivering the non-alcoholic option. But the bigger problems have been soda and cocktails because they're quite hard to get hold of in a way that doesn't generate loads and loads of waste. Bizarrely, the vast majority of cocktails that are kegged come in single-use kegs, and so kegs that just go, and they do get recycled, but they are rubbish. Yeah. And it's just like we were so excited, and I was like, "Great, we've had some keg cocktails." And only about a month down the line, this was the beginning of this year. Only about a month down the line was I like, "Oh wait, we can't use these because I found out the cocktails, the kegs made of plastic, and they get recycled again." But we're looking into a couple of other partnerships that hopefully do deliver cocktails in metal reusable kegs. And so we're just kind of working out how we get that into the bar and the draft system. But yeah, it's easier than most people think. And that's the same with the entire zero waste approach. As long as you put your mind to it, it's actually not as hard as it might sound,
Yeah. But at the moment, it just takes a bit more work to do. But hopefully that will get easier as people start doing it more.
Yeah, well, exactly. So we're opening on Thursday the 11th. And as of recording, it's now Tuesday. And we've run into a couple of issues today with how some of our spaces work, and we're being asked by the site managers to kind of make some changes and stuff. And that's when things get tricky because I have to be like, I'm really sorry, we've built to the design specifications that we've given, and we can't just order something off Amazon and get it here in 2 days. That's just not how we work. We have to say, I'm sorry, but this is as good as it's getting. And for some things that works, and for some things people get a bit upset about it. And, that's the challenge of running an organization like this. But, I enjoy it and it is fun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Are you planning at some point I know you've done Edinburgh, but these are all in London. Are you planning to move further afield toward the country with the theatre?
Yeah, so absolutely. That's my dream, my goal. I think that in order to do that, we need to, so over the next 3 years, what I'd love to do is find basically a permanent or a semi-permanent home for the venue where she can be up for a year or two. And just kind of be there, we can do work. And I think that's my priority because I think once we've done that, it'll then be easier to tour. We'll be able to build a slightly different structure that's a little bit smaller, but that can kind of go to lots of different places. And yeah, I would love to be able to go up and down the country. I think internationally might be a bit of a challenge, but the thing is the venue pretty much flat packs into a Luton van. So it is pretty transportable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's the dream, and that's really, really what I would love to be able to do as soon as possible, as soon as we have the money for it, basically.
Well, once you've perfected putting it up and down with this particular run, yeah,
exactly.
You also do some consultancy work. Now, how difficult is it to green conventional theatre and conventional venues? I mean, you've sort of built everything up from scratch to be like this, but is it more of a challenge to do this in a regular theatre?
I mean, yes, obviously, but it's such a cliche, but we don't need everyone doing it perfectly. If everyone tries and, takes steps in the right direction, that has a huge impact on not just the industry, but on the world and not even, obviously, we are in the midst of a climate crisis. Obviously, it's pretty bad. Obviously, we need to work to change that. But also, it's a much more enjoyable way of working. It's much more mindful. It's slower. It's not as panicked. It is, I think, a better approach to making theatre. It's a healthier approach to making theatre. It's a more considerate approach to making theatre. So is it hard? Some things are hard. Some things aren't. People should do as much as they can and maybe push themselves to do a little bit more than they can. But ultimately, any organization can be pretty close to what we're doing. Any organization could put on a zero waste show. Any organization could. Isn't that hard. Now, altering the entire electrical fixings of an existing venue that was built in the 1800s maybe is more difficult. But just even entering into those discussions around working more sustainably and working zero waste is quite easy. The predominant consultancy we do is for fringe and for smaller venues or for smaller companies, because they're the kind of almost the approach to working sustainably in those smaller organizations is different to when you're thinking about larger organizations and kind of particularly venues. And that's a bit of a gap in the market. And so that's kind of where we're sitting and hoping to provide advice. And it is complicated and it does a little bit take away from our time delivering our work. But I think it's really important. We're looking at other products that we can develop at the moment, like training and that kind of thing, to get people up to speed really quickly, or as quickly as they have the resource and the time for. But yeah, I guess to repeat, it's hard. It can be hard, but it also isn't that hard all the time. It can be, definitely elements of it are always easy.
Yeah. Theatres do seem to be making a lot more of an effort now, because the Theatres Trust produced its Green Book, didn't it, for helping theatres. So have you come across that? Has that been part of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really ties into what I was just saying. Like, it's definitely really useful, but it's not necessarily super useful for smaller organizations who don't have the kind of, such deep infrastructure that they need to make alterations to. And the way of thinking is just a bit different. And so that's we're trying to kind of plug that gap at the moment. And hopefully kind of make that a bit easier. But no, absolutely. It's really positive to see that almost everyone is moving in that direction. And I'm excited to see what the next couple of years hold in terms of like how we move forward from that.
Yeah. Okay, so this run you've got over these few venues that you're travelling around in London, what shows are you going to be showing for us?
Yeah, so when we're at the Royal Docks, we're part of their Sea Change exhibition, which is a load of different art installations all about kind of climate, and particularly I think climate in the Royal Docks as well. So that's really exciting, really looking forward to that. And then once we move into Canary Wharf and Battersea, we're back onto our own programming. So we've got our headline show, which is going to be 7 p.m. every day when the venue's open. And that's called To the Ocean. I'm actually going into rehearsals for that on Wednesday, tomorrow, as of recording, which is very exciting. And that's a kind of modern retelling of the Selkie myth using story and myth and magic and some music as well, to explore our relationship with family and with the kind of natural world around us, particularly with water and the ocean. Really looking forward to that. And then we have a program of incoming shows, like a festival program. So at Canary Wharf, we're hosting about 15 different companies. We're about to put tickets for that program live in the next couple of days. And then Battersea should be pretty similar, basically. It's going to be a program of incoming companies plus our headline show as well. And we've got kind of everything from music to musicals to drama to comedy, loads of different exciting things, just trying to keep the venue kind of packed. Our main thing is we really want the venue to be an exciting place to just spend time, hang out, experience great art, grab a drink. It's not about being sustainable necessarily. It's just about coming and enjoying yourselves. And we want to basically make it as easy as possible. We don't want anyone to even have to think about being sustainable when they're with us. It's just super easy, and they have a good time and they spend time with their friends, see some great art. That's the goal.
That was Oli Savage, Artistic Director of The Greenhouse. The Summer 2023 programme opened at Royal Docks in East London on the 11th of May and runs until the 4th of June. The theatre will then move to Canary Wharf, where it will be open from the 19th of June to the 14th of July, and then finally it opens at Battersea Power Station from the 7th of August to the 3rd of September. For more information, see www.thegreenhousetheatre.com. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.